12-year-old Jennifer Renee Odom was a seventh grader at Thomas E. Waitman Middle School in Wesley Chapel, Florida, in 1993. She played the clarinet in the school band, and she was also a barefoot water skier who placed high in tournaments. Often, she was the skier who climbed to the top of the human pyramid, gliding atop the water. Jennifer was born on August 25, 1980. She was the eldest daughter of Renee Converse and stepdad Clark Converse. She had a 9-year-old sister, Jessica Ann Odom, and was the granddaughter of Jim and Margie Denny. They lived in St. Joseph, a small community near Dade City, Florida. Jennifer and Jessica had a rabbit called Beanie. Jennifer also absolutely loved her Springer Spaniel, Gypsy. The two sisters built forts, rode four-wheelers, and spent summer days swimming in the creek behind their house on the family's 15-acre property. It was a crisp morning on Friday, February 19, 1993, when Jennifer Odom put on her white jeans and white turtleneck in order to get ready for school. She put a red cashmere sweater, a gift from her grandmother, over her shoulder-length chestnut-color hair. She was slim and tan due to spending a lot of time outdoors. On that same morning, after lacing up her pair of black boots, she got into the car with her mother. The two drove 200 yards up the winding Lime Rock driveway to wait for the school bus near their mailbox. Jennifer climbed onto the bus and took her usual spot on the back seat, so she and her mother could see each other until Renee, following behind, turned left to head to work. After school at around 3 p.m., Jennifer stepped off her school bus, waved goodbye to her friends, and started walking the short 200 yards to her home. At about 4 p.m., Jennifer's sister arrived at their home from school to find it locked and unable to enter. She then called their mother to tell her that her big sister was not home yet. Renee Converse then realized Jennifer must not have made it home. She called Jennifer's best friend, Michelle, who stated that she saw Jennifer exit the bus and begin walking home. Jennifer's mother knew something was very wrong and called the police. Within hours, deputies launched a wide-scale search. A search party of about 400 volunteers was formed to help scour about 60 square miles of countryside. Family, friends, neighbors, and other volunteers searched for Jennifer. Law enforcement was equipped with police dogs to fine-comb the rolling groves, pastures, and woods surrounding the tiny Pasco County town of Dade City. Every law enforcement agency in the Bay Area was looking for a blue truck that was seen in the area by some of her classmates. Children riding the school bus with Jennifer remembered seeing an older light blue, unknown model pickup truck slowly following Jennifer down the road in the direction in which she was walking. The children described it as having a silver-painted rear bumper, not chrome, and a trailer hitch with wires hanging, and pipes or a ladder in the back. The driver was described by the children as a white male in his 40s, with shoulder-length brown hair. The blue truck was the focus of the search parties, as investigators believed that the driver may have been involved in the disappearance of Jennifer. As a last resort to find the truck, the FBI as well as Hernando and Pasco County Sheriff's personnel worked from a dock and boathouse, as drivers searched Lake Jovita for the vehicle. 6 days after Jennifer vanished, on Thursday, February 25th, a man and a woman searching an abandoned orange grove about 10 miles north of Jennifer's school bus stop found her badly decomposed, nude body. Her body was found near a horse trail off Powell Road south of Brooksville, amid a cluster of pine trees in the orange grove. She was found viciously assaulted and suffered blunt force trauma to her head. Detectives said she likely lost her life there in the woods, not long after her disappearance. Hernando County Sheriff Al Nienhuis stated, "We are not exactly sure how long her abductor kept her captive or when exactly the slaying took place, but we are relatively confident it took place in that field." He added, "Every one of us, including those in law enforcement, can look at Jennifer as our niece, our sister, our granddaughter, and realize that it is a tragedy beyond tragedy." Jennifer's clothing was never found, neither the blue truck nor its driver. While Jennifer's family was still busy with her funeral arrangements, country music star Vince Gill was scheduled to sing at the local Strawberry Festival on Monday, March 1, 1993. Jennifer's stepfather, Clark Converse, said the girls had looked forward to Gill's performance for weeks, hoping they could get him to autograph photos. Before the concert, Clark Converse and Jessica went to the festival to fulfill Jennifer's wish that Gill autograph a photo in which Jennifer and her sister had posed with the singer at a previous concert on January 10th. Between shows, festival vice president Joe Newsom took the 3 snapshots to Gill, who was eating dinner. Jennifer's stepdad had asked that Gill autograph one for Jessica, one for Jennifer, and one for both girls. Newsom said afterwards, "I told Gill this young lady had been slayed and her dad was outside." Gill replied that he remembered hearing about the incident. He, who also had a young daughter, autographed the photos, writing on one, "To Jennifer, may God be with you," as both Gill and Newsom wept. Gill then went to the night's second show. Before singing the last song, he told the audience about Jennifer. "I'm going to try to get through this the best I can," he said, his voice cracking. Gill sang his Grammy-winning hit, "I Still Believe in You," and dedicated it to Jennifer, who was tragically robbed of her life. Midway through the song, with tears running down his face, Gill asked the crowd to help him finish. Nearly 15,000 voices joined in. Radio personality Jeff Moore stood backstage and looked out at thousands of tear-stained faces. "It was heart-ripping," he said afterwards. Unfortunately, with no one in the community providing investigators with useful information, her case went unsolved. 13 months before Jennifer was abducted, on January 16, 1992, a 17-year-old girl was kidnapped as she got off a school bus in north-central Pasco County. She was found in a pool of blood behind an abandoned house, brutally attacked, assaulted, and beaten. Sheriff Nienhuis said she suffered injuries to her head and skull that were very significant. She survived, but her life was forever changed as she was paralyzed on her left side. Nienhuis said she was a former honor roll student and track and field participant and was a true victim. She was not engaged in a high-risk lifestyle. Law enforcement was able to collect DNA from the crime scene at the time. Since there were similarities between what happened to Jennifer and the unnamed girl, detectives believed the cases may be related. Both victims were adolescent girls who were abducted after getting off of the school bus in Pasco County, taken to a remote field, assaulted, and abandoned with the belief they will succumb to their injuries. The other victim was found just a few miles from where Jennifer's body was found. After a series of blind alleys, the police called upon psychic Nancy Meyer, 16 months after the incident, to assist in finding the person responsible for what happened. Nancy Meyer is a psychic from Pennsylvania who has been working with police around the country for decades. According to Nancy, she had consulted in more than 300 criminal investigations and had offered critical clues more than 80% of the time. Nancy believed that 2 men were involved in taking Jennifer's life. She described them as white, muscular mechanics, and she said one may be a smoker with a heavy cough. The crime scene photographs were classified. Therefore, Nancy Meyer was not allowed to see it. Despite this, she was able to visualize two men in detail. She was taken to the site where Jennifer's body was found. Nancy pointed out that there were belongings in a nearby area that had not yet been discovered. She was able to describe several of Jennifer's items that were still missing, including her cousin's clarinet case with the letters L.O. on them. She continued to give information about the perpetrators in hope of solving the case. Detective Carlos Douglas of the Hernando County Sheriff's Office said, "Nancy Meyer was extremely accurate on some things that led us to look in other areas that we had not thought of, so we obtained a lot of information from what she had to offer." On December 2, 1994, Jennifer's unsolved case was aired on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries on national TV. After the show aired, more than 50 phone tips and even more investigative leads from around the country arrived by mail at the Hernando County Sheriff's Office. A spokesman of the Sheriff's Office said, "The show did for us what we wanted it to do. It got us some more exposure." Despite the new exposure, former Hernando County Sheriff's Major Gary Zorn Smith, who oversaw the investigation in its early years, said that investigators were stumped. He said there was a strong possibility the crime would go unsolved. And what's even worse is that if we solve it, it may take another crime to do it, he said at the time. Approximately 2 years after Jennifer's body was found, on Thursday, January 5, 1995, a couple hunting for scrap metal in a rural area of Hernando County discovered Jennifer's missing book bag and clarinet case. It was found several miles from the location of her body. Police were able to lift fingerprints from her backpack and clarinet case from what is believed to be the person responsible. Unfortunately, there was never a hit in the database for a suspect matching these fingerprints. Over the years, the case garnered national attention and haunted the Tampa Bay region. Thousands of dollars in reward money offered for tips went unclaimed. Detectives logged tens of thousands of hours chasing leads. Jennifer's family waited for news as the years turned to decades. Jennifer's mother, Renee Converse, wondered if it was somebody Jennifer knew. Clark Converse, Jennifer's stepfather, added, "There is a real chance that the person who did it is somebody we have contact with. If they catch someone, we're going to be thrown into the spotlight. Learning how to deal with a trial and confronting this person is going to throw us to square one in learning to deal with this." Renee said she cries a bit more each year. The reality is that Jennifer is gone and will never be in our lives again. Nothing is going to change that. She also said that the family is thankful for what they do know. "We are blessed that we have this much closure. We are not looking for her. We know where she is. It is going to be a bittersweet finale." She could still picture her 12-year-old daughter, slim and sun-kissed, waving goodbye out the back window of the Pasco County school bus. It was the last time she would see her brown-eyed firstborn girl. Renee recounts the last words being spoken between the two as, "I love you." The couple said they have done everything possible to cooperate in finding Jennifer's slayer. They wanted the person found so that no one else got hurt. On Monday, February 19, 2007, the St. Petersburg Times reported that it marked 14 years since the unsolved abduction and subsequent slaying of Jennifer. In that same year, members of Hernando County Crime Stoppers handed out special playing cards to inmates at the Hernando County Detention Center. Each card featured a brief description of an unsolved case from around the state and a hotline number. Jennifer's card was the Queen of Diamonds and featured 2 color photos. A website has been set up by the Hernando Sheriff's Office with pictures and information about Jennifer. A slideshow was also put together with photos of Jennifer set to a mournful soundtrack. Hernando County Detective George Lloydgren later on headed the cold case unit. He was armed with the latest DNA technology and a disturbing theory. "I believe that there is probably one person, if not more, that would know who is responsible for this," he said. He also believed that person could be a family member or ex-spouse, either protecting the perpetrator or too afraid to come forward. "I think the reason people do not want to get involved is they may not want to sit there and have to testify against that individual." Over the years, a couple of anonymous tips came in that led investigators to believe that there are several people out there with more information, and the investigators wanted them to come forward. They tried various methods of generating new leads, from billboards and a $20,000 reward to a documentary on national TV. Investigators amassed some 1,000 pieces of evidence, took thousands of tips, and conducted hundreds of interviews over time to try to determine who took Jennifer's life. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reached out to the sheriff's office and offered to scan every piece of paper in Jennifer's case so it would be readily available. It was more than 75,000 pieces of paper. During all the investigations, there were clues, including the fingerprints on Jennifer's clarinet case and backpack. There were also suspects. Serial offender Frank Thaniel Potts was a possible suspect. He assaulted a 10-year-old girl in Lakeland in 1993. At the time of the slaying, he was working on a construction site in Pasco County and owned a blue pickup truck, which he allegedly later dismantled. Authorities were unable to link him to Jennifer's case, however. Another possible suspect was Walter Ducharme, who lived in the area at the time of the slaying. His ex-wife claimed that he was responsible for it. However, her testimony was inconsistent. When the case against him was presented to a grand jury, he was not indicted. He was no longer believed to be involved in the case. In February 2015, Detective George Lundgren was contacted by Pasco County Sheriff Chris Nocco. According to him, new technology had led to a solid lead in the 1992 case in which the teenage girl was found alive. It was the case investigators believed was linked to Jennifer's. The odds of finding another match, Nocco said, was 1 in 7.7 nonillion, a number with 30 zeros. Lloydgren commented, "I think DNA is going to be a big part of Jennifer's case, as it is with any of the old cases, because items were collected. It is just now that the technology has advanced." The biological evidence found in the investigation of the 1992 case was tested before February 2015, and detectives got a full DNA profile. Investigators used a DNA procedure known as familial searching, which allows law enforcement to find a suspect by comparing male DNA left at the scene with that of family members. The shortfall of a standard DNA search is that a suspect's genetic fingerprint must be on file in the offender database for law enforcement to make a match. Sheriff Nienhuis said until 2015 there were no leads on that particular piece of DNA. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement compared the DNA to local DNA to see if there were any close matches, which would be a family member. The sheriff said they found the DNA matched that of Jeffrey Crum, who was in jail at the time. Investigators then obtained DNA samples from Crum's brother, father, and grandfather. A direct comparison between the DNA found on the victim and that of Crum's father found a match. Investigators concluded that Jeffrey Crum took the girl from the 1992 case by the arm and led her behind the abandoned house, where he hit her head with a blunt object so hard it crushed part of her skull and caused her to lose part of her brain, leaving her paralyzed on the one side. This then finally led to the arrest of Jeffrey Crum, 53 years old at the time, in connection to the 1992 case. It was Crum's arrest in this case, authorities said, that made him a person of interest, reinvigorating an investigation in Jennifer's case. Sheriff Al Nienhuis said, when Crum was implicated in the 1992 case, he quickly, almost instantaneously, became our #1 suspect in Jennifer's case because of the similarities. He also noted that over the years there were suspects, but Crum was not on that list, so he came out of left field in 2015. In 2018, on the 25th anniversary of her daughter's demise, Jennifer's mother told The Times that she and other family members tried to have faith that her case would eventually be solved. I think the investigators would have done anything in the world to have solved this case. In 2019, Crum was sentenced to life in prison for the crime he committed in 1992, leaving his victim partly paralyzed. The victim's aunt spoke in court during the sentencing hearing, recounting the lifelong damage he had inflicted. Her aunt said her life stopped that day. She also mentioned Jennifer. A year later, a young lady, Jennifer Odom, was slayed, she said, and that brought back so much different things that today the perpetrator still has not been caught. The arrest and sentence of Crum gave Detective Lloydgren a new resolve, and Jennifer's family new hope that the person responsible will be caught. Detectives then began an intensive investigation and interviewed everyone they could find for the next several years that may have been associated with Crum around the time Jennifer was kidnapped. This information was turned over to the state attorney, and the facts and circumstances were turned over to a grand jury. On July 27, 2023, a month shy of what would have been Jennifer's 43rd birthday, officials announced that they had finally made an arrest in the case and that prosecutors would seek capital punishment against the accused. State Attorney Bill Glass made the announcement during a press conference. This was just after the Hernando County Sheriff's Office announced that it has charged the 61-year-old Jeffrey Norman Crum with the kidnapping, assault, and slaying of Jennifer 30 years before. Glass also said, "I have confidence that we have the right person, and we have the right aggravators in this particular case to treat it as a capital punishment case. This is every parent's nightmare. This is the thing that keeps parents up at night, worried about their children." Detective George Lloydgren, who had spent years investigating Jennifer's case, said, "Shock is probably the best word to describe the reaction of Jennifer's family when he told them about the arrest. He said he did it quickly because I did not want to get emotional. It is a lot for them to take in and absorb, and I can imagine it is going to take some time before it really sinks in." According to Sheriff Nienhuis, every viable lead for the past 30 years, including those that came from the Pasco County Sheriff's Office or the Florida Department of Law Enforcement or private citizens, were investigated thoroughly. He added, the investigation never stopped. Hundreds of items were tested and retested every time new technology came out in the hope of finding a smoking gun to solve this case. The sheriff added, countless, literally countless detectives and sworn law enforcement personnel and civilian and tipsters have had a hand in this investigation. The minute Crum was identified as a suspect in the case, Detective Lundgren went to work putting a mosaic together, or a puzzle, and I can tell you, other than the conviction in a previous case, there was no other piece of the puzzle. That was a big piece of the puzzle. Every other piece of the puzzle that got us to this point were tiny little fragments that gave the state attorney and the grand jury enough confidence to indict Crum. Sheriff Nienhuis also said that they are searching for additional victims. Authorities fear Crum may be responsible for other crimes. A picture of him from 1993 was released, asking that anyone who recognized him from the 1980s and 1990s to contact Sheriff Nienhuis. We urge anyone who had interactions with this individual, has information on other crimes he may have committed, and/or may have themselves been a victim of Jeffrey Crum, to reach out to the Hernando County Sheriff's Office and speak to our cold case unit. Despite keeping a lot of information close to the vest, authorities did say that in 1992, Crum worked in construction as a drywall installer and lived on Somerset Lane in Spring Hill, the Pasco County area where Jennifer was abducted from. His residence was about 21 miles from the place where Jennifer was last seen and 12 miles from where her body was found. Officials also say at that time he drove a blue truck. During Thursday, July 27, 2023's press conference, Sheriff Nienhuis kept reiterating Crum was not on the investigators' radar until the past few years. Records showed Crum has a significant history of convictions for violent crime. The sheriff said Crum had been arrested in the early 1980s for armed robbery in Hillsborough County. In 1985, he was charged with kidnapping, assault, and false imprisonment in Hillsborough County. He was arrested by Tampa police in 1987 for carrying a concealed weapon. In 1988, he was caught again carrying a concealed weapon and was charged with aggravated assault. In 1998, he was arrested for domestic violence in Hernando County 3 times. In 2001, he was arrested for violation of probation in Hillsborough County. He was arrested a few years later for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon in Hernando County. In 2015, he was arrested in Pasco County for aggravated assault on a child under the age of 12. Sheriff Nienhuis stated, "He is a bad individual who enjoyed violence." Crum is already serving 2 life sentences for the assault and kidnapping case out of Pasco County that was prosecuted around 2015. He is currently in the Hernando County Jail. Judge Kurt E. Hitzman ordered him to be held without bond and appointed a public defender to represent him. Communities in Pasco and Hernando counties were on edge after Jennifer Odom's kidnapping and slaying back then. They shared their thoughts and feelings after the news of the arrest was announced. Jeannie Cameron, the general manager at Papa Joe's Italian restaurant in Brooksville, said she and others in the community remember hearing about her disappearance all too well. So we all remember hearing about her disappearance, Jennifer's, and about the blue truck, and everybody was on alert about looking. I think the bottom line was finding out who did it and getting him off the streets so that another family doesn't have to be tormented, because I really feel like the whole community was tormented until they found out the answer. Joseph Giorratana, the owner of Papa Joe's Italian restaurant, said, "Back then, 30 years ago as a parent, I was very angry that someone could do something like that to a child and then leave her there in the middle of nowhere." Jessica Ellis said she went to Waitman Middle School with Jennifer and played in the same clarinet section in band class. "I would say we saw each other a lot. We weren't like close friends, but we knew a lot of the same people. We rode the school bus every day, and I just remember her always being nice with me and everyone else that rode her school bus that knew her. You know, a lot of us are parents ourselves now. The fact that anyone would do this to a child, it makes me hold my 5-year-old a lot tighter now." Grief and fear followed in the days, months, and years after Jennifer lost her life. The arrest of Crum is closure for many in the community.